Hi, my name is Monica Fernandes. Here at Evolution Essentials, I want you to love yourself first. That's why I teach people how to lead a wellness lifestyle with holistic tools such as essential oils and Reiki. So you too can have more love, more health, and more balance in your life. I felt inspired to connect with my loved ones, my friends, and contacts all over the world. They are experts in their field. I wanted to share with you our conversations and how we deal with stress and crisis. So if at any moment in your life you're feeling down, this show is for you.
Hi, Faisal.
Hello, Monica.
Well, welcome to Evolution Talks. For those people that don't know you, I just wanted to introduce you and let you tell us a little bit about yourself. So, Faisal Ensaun.
Thank you, and I'm so excited to be on this YouTube channel. Right, it's not a podcast yet.
It could be at some point.
Be. Okay,
yes.
So podcast, YouTube channel. I'm so excited to be here, and I just want to honor you. And we talked a little bit before this.
Yes.
And in front of your audience, I want to honor you for your courage to be able to move forward and make a difference in the world. I think it's so important, and I really respect that. And I feel blessed and humbled to be here. Thank you for getting me on this. And our goal here is, as we talk, is to serve people. So I'll make my story relevant to what. Not that I'm going to create a story relevant to them, but my story relevant to what people are being impacted right now. So my name is Faisal Ensaun. As you said, I'm a high performance coach, trainer, and I've been doing this for a little over 5-6 years, something like that. And I work with one-on-one clients, and you were from entrepreneurs to investors to executives, professionals. A lot of times I end up with leaders who are usually leading other teams or their community or organizations, and I help them not only increase their performance in different areas of their life, from their personal lives, relationship, their confidence and courage, and how they show up in their world, but also their impact in the world, how they deal with their teams, how they lead their team, and also create a more positive perspective for themselves and the interactions that they have in their environment. So that's what I generally do, and my focus is usually to help people recognize their potential in their life. A lot of us walk around thinking that I'm just this ordinary person and I'm just here to live my life for a few days. But what we don't realize, and what hasn't been taught to us, is that we all have an incredible amount of potential within us. That and we see this with kids. Like when you watch kids, we all assume that this kid has so much potential. Yet at some point when that kid grows up, the potential disappears from our mind. Yet it's the same kid that's growing up. And that potential is always there. And it becomes a choice whether or not we let it come out, let it express itself, or just let it stay dormant. And unfortunately for most people, it just stays dormant. They don't realize their true potential, not because they can't. Partly is choice. Another part of it is that our education system, our environment, the society doesn't give us the tools or the awareness or the guidance to be able to go towards that as much as it should be, at least. And that's why we're doing this, to help people move towards that. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself in terms of my story. And I've told this story before on another podcast. I was interviewed. I was born in a third world country, Afghanistan, and within 3 years of me being born, my parents had to flee the place because of war. And just like we're talking about the pandemic here and the stress around this, you can imagine when bombs are falling out, the governments. I mean, this is probably 1% of what's going on there in that region. People had to literally take their clothes. It was chaos. They couldn't even take the anything from. They had to leave relatives. They had to leave their community and illegally cross the border into the neighboring third world country where they weren't really welcome to go there. And my parents had to do that, and they found a way to make a living somehow, because we were all survivors. We figured it out. And that's something we forget about human beings, that the fact that we're here, we are literally in charge of almost everything on Earth is because we have been able to survive and thrive as a species. So we have that within our DNA. So we do. So most of the people, they did survive. They did get out. Were there casualties? Were there people who suffered a lot? Yes, definitely. See, people suffered in different ways in terms of their families passing away or getting injured, the depression, stress, all sorts of stuff, and leaving their jobs, their houses, their communities. So they went on to that. So my family moved over to the neighboring third world country, and we've somehow found a way to make a living. And as you can imagine, when you are in a situation like that, and the environment there is, and this is something it's hard to explain this to people unless somebody has traveled to those places like Pakistan, India, and Afghanistan. It's hard to show people the difference in the lifestyle. The quality of living here it's as if you landed on a different planet.
I can imagine. I mean, I can't imagine, but I know what you're saying. Yes.
So the place. I mean, we've all watched movies where you see favelas or ghettos or things like that, and they just multiplied that to about 100 more, and 100 times more. It gets pretty bad. And even
precarious living conditions.
Yeah. So bad living conditions in terms of health, in terms of just being in a negative environment where you're always scared. And for example, one of the fears that my parents had at that time, I have two older sisters. They're both good right now, but at that time their fear was that somebody would just kidnap them. And there were actually factions that would look for people's daughters to take them away, and nobody could stop them because the laws weren't like here. There was no government that was able to do that. In any case, there were a lot of fear. There was a lot of fear, and people were just like this in a panic mode, but in a sense, in a perpetual panic mode that went on for years and years, not just a few months. In any case, they did develop a life, and they created their own norm. They had their own normal. And while this stuff is going on, what's amazing to me is that people found a way, despite all that trauma, despite all the craziness, despite all the chaos, they found a way to enjoy their life. And to me, that was incredible. Not only did they enjoy their life, many of them left that place and found that they could thrive. They created businesses. They're an amazing. You can find people from that place and almost around the world in positions of power and having amazing businesses, creating lives that they enjoy. They're happy. They're fulfilled. Many of them. And to me, that was so crazy because I didn't know how people can have so much trauma, generational trauma, as well as war trauma, as well as the depression, stress, consistent struggle with the lifestyle, yet they can still find a way to live a happy and fulfilled life.
Going from one extreme to the other.
Yeah, and it's even within this extreme they can find. And right now I have family back home who are within war, within those kind of regions, but they have their own norm. They're not completely miserable. There's this innate ability we have to be able to kind of accept whatever environment it is once we stop resisting and start living our life. We'll talk about resistance after, but a few years later, my extended family, they sponsored us to, when I was in my early or mid-teens, we were sponsored to come over to Canada. That's where I live right now. I call this home. Love this place. My daughters were born here. And when we came over here, you'd think that I'd have an amazing life coming here, but in looking back, it's so amazing for me because that was one of the lowest points in my life. Even going all that stuff, that was probably one of the lowest points in my life. And mainly because just the culture shock, being in that age, not knowing who I was, not having the guidance, not having the tools to be able to move forward. Yes, I mean, the schools here are much better than where I was. The system was much better. There was cleaner, healthier, and all sorts of things. But the guidance that I needed wasn't there, and I didn't know what to do with it. And for some reason, for me, I had a very hard time adapting to this environment. So it took me about 7 years or so to do that. But within those 7 years, I got into all sorts of negative things, from depression to alcohol addiction to drug addiction to getting into all sorts of negative lifestyle adaptations. And at the time, I didn't know what was going on.
Mhm.
All I knew was that I kept trying to find things to run away from who I was. So if that was playing games all the time, I'd do that. If that was drugs, I would do that. If that was
Escape.
going out, I would do it. It was just escape for me. And the reason I would escape is because I had no other way of dealing with any of that.
Mhm.
I did not have tools or the awareness or anybody to guide me. And anybody else that was in that environment, the main answer that I would get was, this is how life is. I'm like, okay, I guess that's how life is. And then it's to me, when I was going through that, I accepted it for a while, even though I was miserable. I'm like, okay, I guess this is how life is. And then at some point, it stopped making sense. And that was when I had experienced so much emotional pain, so much physical pain. In essence, my body was breaking down in so many ways. And I even as a young man, I was feeling that.
Mhm.
And I noticed that there had to be something that's different. There had to be another way. There had to be a better way of living, even though everybody else around me is saying that no, there isn't.
Wow.
So at that point, I started thinking, and I started asking this question: is there a better way? And I didn't know the answer to that, so I started studying anything that I could get my hands on, because I realized everything that I had based my trust on, from systems, from religious system to government systems, to school systems, to family system, none of them were giving me the answer to what I needed. So I
Mhm.
started studying anything that I could get my hands on, from psychology to philosophy, spirituality, history, sciences related to human behavior and natural systems, anything that would help me see the missing pieces of the puzzle. And as I started studying these things, it just opened up a whole new world that I wasn't aware of at all. And
How
like
did you find these things?
it started with just I remember one of the first books that I picked up, and was, well, actually no, this was in college. Actually, one of the classes when I studied mechanical engineering,
Okay.
and when I was in college, I took an elective class because I thought it was interesting and it would teach me something. And it was an easy class. Everybody told me about. So it was a psychology class.
Okay.
So I go in there, and then Stan Cameron was my teacher. I've never forgotten him. He was just an incredible teacher. It's just the way he was. It wasn't the course itself. It's just the way how passionate he was about teaching, and how interested he was in people. And I sat in that class, and usually that class would be like the last class at the end of the day, and it's a 3-hour long class once a week.
Wow.
I'd be falling asleep by that time, but there I would be like this. My eyes are wide open, and I'm looking at this guy's so, and I'm like, how could he be so passionate? And that class, I think I was doing in the high 90s. I was doing so good in that class, and every time we would talk, and he would joke around, he'd be like, so what program are you in? I'd be like, oh, engineering. And then he would just give me a funny look. He wouldn't say anything. Really, engineering? It's like, why are you doing so well here?
You can be multifaceted, right?
Yeah. So and I at the time I didn't realize that, but I took a couple of courses in psychology, and then I started getting interested in more and more in human behavior. Maybe if I can learn a little bit in that class, what else could I learn?
Mhm. Mhm.
And that was an elective. That wasn't part of any kind of, I had to
Yes.
choose to do that. And as I started studying philosophy, I remember one of the first books that I picked up on my own. Actually, my friend gave me that, was Psychology and Religion by Carl Gustav Jung. Amazing book. I've read it like 2-3 times. And it's a small book, but it had so much wisdom in that, and it was like finding clues to what's happening. It's like
Mhm.
it was becoming like this amazing puzzle that I had to discover. And I just kept going one after the other. I kept reading books, and then I had these amazing conversations with my friends, the friends I used to play games all the time and go out and stuff. All of a sudden the conversations changed to, we would sit at coffee shops for not all night. We would talk about these things, like aren't these things amazing? And
You
even though
went
at that,
deeper. You went deeper.
we went much deeper. And then as I started studying, one of the most important things that I realized, that whatever I was doing wasn't in alignment with what I was learning. And there's even a term in psychology for that, is that we have an ideal self and we have an actual self. The
Mhm. Mhm.
ideal self is what we aspire to be, and the
Yes.
actual is what we live in that moment. And
Mhm.
the farther away we are from those two, the more problems we have with it. We perceive a lot of negativity within ourselves because we want to be something that we're not.
Mm-hmm.
But even as soon as we start moving towards that, it tends to create a shift in perspective because we start to think that, I can be that better person.
Mm-hmm.
Not better like somebody else, but a better version of myself.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that to me was powerful. And I started thinking maybe I can be better. I don't know, but maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And just as I kept going towards that, I started meeting different people, started connecting with different people. And at some point, and this was 6 years ago, as I finished school, I started working in my field. It was a technical field, and I had a comfortable job. I was in an office in front of a computer. The first 6 months was so interesting because I was making improvements, all sorts of stuff. But after a little while, after 6 months or so, I noticed other people there. And one of the scariest moments that I had, it was so interesting. I came in, and this was, I think, 6 months or 7 months after I was in the job. One of the guys beside me, he had been working there for 10 years. And I just watched him for a whole week. He had the same exact routine. He would come in, he would have his little breakfast there, and he would work on the computer. Then he'd go for a walk, come back in. That was his life, basically, that little cubicle. And by Friday or Thursday, I freaked out. I was like, I felt anxiety in that moment. Like, I do not want to be that.
You didn't want your future to be in a cubicle.
I did not. I felt so restricted.
Over and over again.
Yeah, it's not that the job was bad or the opportunity was bad, any of that, but I felt not restricted in a sense when I started noticing that most people there could do their job within 3 hours in a day, yet they were spending 8-9 hours sitting there pretending to work. And I thought I was the only one. And at first my ego came up like, I'm doing things much better than other people, so I'm done in 3 hours. Then I started noticing other people were on playing games. And I wouldn't do that. I would just go and make myself food, walk around, and I would do push-ups, all sorts of stuff. I would work out at that time too. And then one day my manager comes up, he's like, we have clients coming in. You can't always be eating and going to the kitchen. And I'm like, well, I'm done my work and I'm actually doing extra stuff. It's like, well, can you just make sure, essentially he was telling me to pretend to work. And I did not get that. I didn't understand that. And I couldn't go home because I had to be there for 8 hours because they had to pay me for that. It just made no sense to me whatsoever. So I moved from that job to the next job, very similar culture. And I didn't like the way that they treated people too, in terms of they treated people more like machines than they did people. And I went towards management position to see maybe I can make a difference. But the culture was so embedded towards this is the way we do things that I could not align myself with that. And I became so miserable in that state that I was like, you know what, we need a big shift. And my wife and I, we decided, you know what, and I started at that time. I actually and that's why I was telling you that this is so powerful that I started following some thought leaders and experts about these things. And one of the people that I follow was Brendon Burchard, who's my coach now, my trainer, and that's the program. His program was the one that I signed up for, or more accurately, he trains within High Performance Institute. I just listened to this guy and was like, he is so happy and he's so fulfilled with what he does. He reminded me of my psychology professor.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. It's almost like, you recognize that passion and that drive that they were doing what they were meant to do.
Yeah, like he must be doing something different. And I didn't know if he was the real deal or anything. It's just something I felt connected to something, his authenticity. And then we made a decision, you know what's the worst that could happen? We dropped everything. And interestingly enough, I got laid off, and that gave me some time to think about all of these. And after 3 or 4 months, we're like, you know what, let's put everything we got and let's take a month-long vacation, and we'll go to his seminar and figure out how to create a different life. It's the most ridiculous thing we could think of at that time. And everybody else was like, what are you doing? You're going to lose your whole life, a good career, this, that, and the other. And we're like, I mean, what's the worst that could happen? We'll come back.
You have the opportunity, the time showed up for that to happen. So you took it.
Yeah. And it was just, and it's not that the journey was easy from there to here. It's just that the amount of growth we have had, what we've learned, what we have experienced as people, the people that we have met, the environments that we've been part of, it's just been incredible. It's been like a dream come true just because of that step that we took forward. And that was an incredible, and by the way, I want to point out something. Right now we are in this COVID pandemic, and when I'm looking, yes, people are going through difficult times. They are dealing with stress. They're dealing with illness. They're dealing with death. Many people, they're dealing with their financial crisis.
Yes.
Now, you can look at it in that way, but what if we turn this around? Now, just looking back at the time when I got laid off, if I didn't have those 4 months to sit down and try to figure out a different path, if I didn't sit down with myself, if I didn't think about my life, if I didn't reevaluate things, if I didn't connect with my wife in a different way, I wouldn't be sitting here, to be honest. I would not be here. It wouldn't give me the courage to move forward, because most of us, when we're going through this rat race, every day going to work, coming back, that's our normal. We're just on this treadmill and we don't realize how our life is going. And this one of the most interesting things from one of my favorite philosophers, Alan Watts, he says that, I mean, we're taught this pattern that we go through in life. We go to school, we do a bunch of schooling, and then we're told to get a better job, get to the best school, and then find the best job. And then when we get to the job, we do this for a number of years, accumulate some stuff, buy some houses, and do some good things. And then after we get to our, I don't know, 40s or 50s, and we come to retirement, we get there, oh my God, I'm finally there. And then we look around, it's like, we feel like we're there, but with a certain sense of being cheated. And it's like, is that what I wanted, or is that what was given to me?
Or sort of like the expected sort of path that everybody takes, right? Or that you're supposed to.
And I didn't buy into that after a little while, because it was and sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
Okay.
It's just, and that not buying into that allowed me to go towards a different path.
Yes. So right now, consider that there's people that are probably in a very similar situation that you were in when you were laid off, because of everything that's happening now. So what happens if one of your clients that has lost their job calls you for advice? What do you tell them?
That's an interesting question, because I actually have a couple of clients that have gone through this, and everybody's been affected. And two of my clients, at least one of them specifically, completely lost his whole business. I mean, the way he had set up everything evaporated, because he couldn't do anything anymore. He had to sit at home and recreate. Now, it is an interesting concept, because I've been around friends and family and other people that I've dealt with who have gone through that. And then I'm also working with my clients. Usually my clients are a little bit different. They have a different perspective on the world. So for example, this client whose whole income evaporated, his business gone, he doesn't know when it'll be back. Nobody knows what's going on right now. Yet he had and usually as a coach, I don't tell people what to do. I do give them perspective. I do give them tools, but I want to know how they're going to get out of this. Most of us have answers for these things, but we don't trust in ourselves to find that answer. And what's interesting for me is that when people who are outside of the environments that I feel like are very empowering, whether it's in a coaching relationship or masterminds or places where people are supporting each other at a different level, versus on average, when you see people who are struggling with these things, they tend to have different mindset about this. So I'll give you the difference. The difference is that on average, if somebody goes through a time like this, they've lost their job or business, they are in a bad state, and their first thought is who they can blame for this. Who they can blame for this, who can they they show their anger, frustration. And I get that. Everybody, when you go through a thing like this, that's completely reasonable, that you will be angry, you will be stressed, you will be frustrated. Now, they will be in that state and they will feel like a victim to the circumstance. And they won't know what to do, because in that moment they have decided that my job was everything, my life was everything, what I am outside of that is nothing. And then I've also gotten the other perspective now, specific to my client. He went through the same things. And when I asked him, like, well, how are you doing with this, and how are you dealing with this, and how are you going to deal with this moving forward? He's like, and he's upset. He's upset, and he is clearly upset, and he's clearly uncertain about the future. But he had a different approach. He's like, okay, yes, I have lost this, but I've just spent the last 10 years of my life developing myself with my business. And I have faith in myself enough to figure this out. Now, he doesn't know how he's going to figure it out, but he has faith in himself to figure it out. And I asked him, like, how did you get that faith in yourself? And his answer is interesting. He's like, I've spent a lot of time dealing with similar things, not that big, but I've actually challenged myself to grow. I've tried to deal with circumstances differently. I've tried to connect with other people, learn their perspective. I've tried to study this stuff. I've tried to figure out things and be okay. And one of the statements that my mentor always says is that honor the struggle. And that is an extremely important thing, because we find that when you actually look at, I told you my story of growth came out of a place of struggle. And that tends to be the theme for humanity. If you actually look at history, if you watch these amazing empires that came out of nowhere, if you actually trace them back, you find that this small little community usually is actually going through a lot of hardship. One person or a family or a community, and somehow they find a way to move forward with faith in themselves, faith in God, or faith in their ability to figure this, whatever the faith is in, they find a way to figure things out. And out of that comes this amazing empire, good or bad later on, it doesn't matter. But what it is that out of that struggle comes progress. The microcosm is in each of our lives. We can either come out of struggle and go towards, look at it that this is helping us create progress, or we can look at it and say, I'm the victim of this. I need to find somebody to blame right now. And I need to be comforted right now.
I think you touched on something that's, the having faith in yourself part, because it sounds like you share that in common with, I guess everybody shares that in common when they have that faith in themselves during that struggle. So for example, with your client, his faith in himself, he was humble enough to say, I know people, I have the tools to, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this, but I have the tools to kind of shift and gain some knowledge on how I'm going to deal with this. So I feel like it's essential to have that sort of tank, the self-love tank completely full. And then you don't need that sort of stroking of the ego all the time, and you are mature enough to say, hey, I'm going to reach out, there's tools available, and not say, poor me, blame this, blame that, right? It's the perspective. But I feel like that what's different in this is that sort of faith in yourself, or whatever it is, but that's sort of power, that core that is enabling you to look outside of the situation. I don't know if that made sense, but that's how
I love that, and you touched on a few things there, and I love your perspective on that. So and it's interesting, because if you actually look at and I talk to people every day. On average, I'd be talking to at least 5 or 6 individuals, and when I'm doing my groups, on average, let's say 10 to 15 within a group that I'm talking to, and I run a mastermind as well. So I'm consistently in conversation with some of the most intelligent people you're going to meet. And what you find is when you actually look at people's history, if you actually look at your own history, let me actually ask you this. Do you think you have been through some tough times that you didn't think you were going to make it, but you found a way to do that?
Definitely. I feel like that there's been times in my life where I was the sticking my head in the sand type person. that
And
I
we
didn't.
all do that. My hand is up there. We all, in
Yeah.
that moment, we think that, oh my God, the world has gone upside down and I'm not going to recover out of this.
Right. And I feel it's because you feel the world in your shoulders. You feel that responsibility, and you feel like this is so much pressure, and you don't want to deal with it, but it's happening, and you stick your head in the sand, and you don't know how you're going to get out of it. You feel stuck.
Yeah. And,
Um,
and go ahead.
no, I'm just saying that, you know, I've but it's not something that, I don't think, in my experience, that you stay there for very long. It may take, you know, a week, a month, a year, maybe a few years to get out of it. But at some point, it's going to change, because change is inevitable, isn't it?
Well, change is the system that we live within. If you actually notice, I mean, these clues are there within our environment that everything changes. Nothing that we do in our life ever stays the same. And there's this, one of the most profound things I've heard is comes from Buddha. It was told, I think, by Alan Watts in one of his lectures, but and I hope I can say this properly. But I'd say it's a translated version from Sanskrit, I'd say. But what the way Buddha described reality was that it's the reality is like a fog or a smoke that we're trying to grab onto with an illusionary hand. Neither of them are tangible, neither of them are real. We're always, the illusion is that we can grab something that's going to disappear with something that doesn't exist.
I see.
And it's that first of all, the depth of that is incredible, because anything that we feel like we have control over, we actually don't, especially when it comes to our environment. And we've been given this illusion that, let's say you get a job and you have this job security. There is no such thing. We all know that. There is no security in a business per se. Economy can tank.
This time is the perfect example of that, right?
It shows people. I mean, this is why this time is such an important awakening moment for so many people, because you can either take this as a lesson to open your eyes what is actually important. And from a lot of my clients, it's just been an incredible time for them. Not that they haven't suffered, not that they haven't gone through a negative thing, but they've noticed that. So one of my clients who's I love this guy. He's a dentist. He's an investor. He does so many things. He's an athlete, and he's so busy in his life. He does so many amazing things, and he's a high achiever. And he has this dream, his vision, that he wants to have a life that's free and just a life where he can be with his family, where he can contribute to the world, where he's not always running around on a treadmill constantly, even though he's doing very well for himself. And that's what he's working towards now. As soon as this thing happened, his job disappeared. Everything shut down, and one day, I mean, he was on a group call too, and I asked him that in front of everybody, like, you know, how are you doing? How would you rate your life right now? He's like, it's a 10. I'm like, that's really odd, because you just lost your job. You're hurting in terms of your investments. You don't have the life that you had before. Yeah, you're saying a 10. Why is that? And we were actually talking about the concept of control in our life. He's like, I feel like I'm in full control of my life right now. It's such an odd thing for him to say. And I'm like, okay, go ahead, elaborate on that. He's like, not only do I feel like I'm in control of my life, this is giving me an experience of the kind of life that I want. I want to be with my family. I want to be connected to the people in my life. I want to have time to take care of myself. I want to have time to go for a walk. I want to have time to do the things that I want. This is what I'm working towards. This just gave me a preview, a trailer of what I want. Yes. Why wouldn't I love this time?
So he was getting that experience that he was working towards, right? He was getting that experience during this time.
Yeah, and not everybody will be in that situation. He's a little bit comfortable because of what he had worked towards. But now I also know people who are in a situation, and I asked someone I know who's hurting in terms of his business is shutting down. and I care about this person. And when he was telling me about his business and everything, yeah, nothing is working. I have no idea when this is gonna. And he's worked on this for the past 10 years of his life, maybe. And it's creating a lot of stress for him, family challenges, all sorts of things. Like, do you realize that? And this is something I don't know if he noticed or not, but as he was been building this business, he hasn't been. We think that when we're building something, a skill set, a business, or we're actually building that thing. But what we don't realize is that the thing in itself is a byproduct of who we are. We're not building the thing, we're building ourselves that's able to build that. And this is an interesting question. A lot of times my clients would come up to me and be like, there's something really hard they're working on. They're like, I don't think I can do this, to be honest. And they're all stressed. I'm like, you're right. I don't think you can. And it sounds odd. I'm like, but who would you have to become for you to be able to do that? And that is a different perspective. What do you have to develop within yourself? And that person who's gone through the past 10, 15 years of his life developing a business, he's developed skills, connections, awareness, know-how. If you broke down all of his business, if he had a little bit faith in himself, do you think he'd be able to build it up in the next 5 years versus 15 years?
Right. I think it's a perspective of what's lacking versus what you can gain, meaning like what work can you do on yourself to achieve this, instead of I can't, I don't do this, I can't, I don't have it, right? Sort of like the life is happening to me, as opposed to you're doing it, you're creating the life.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends. See you next time.